So maybe we should go ahead and get started with our sort of business of the chapter first. And I'm Deb Dale, and I'm coordinated this symposium. So thanks everybody for attending day 3. Thanks to my helpers who helped get this moving. And I think, Carrie, do you want to say a few words about the chapter and membership? And then I will thank our sponsor, and then we can turn it over to Angie.
Sure. I'm Carrie Dufour. I am the co-president of the Plan Giving Roundtable of Southern Arizona this year, and want to take a minute and welcome you. Thank you all for coming. As it relates to membership, we welcome any new members, and really our goal is to elevate the role of plan giving and to increase networking between development folks and professional advisors so that we have an understanding of where we're each coming from and, you know, how to promote plan giving, you know, across the community. We are looking at a membership change, and so please be on the lookout for some new membership materials that we hope will be coming out in January 2021, and some options for being part of our local chapter or also being part of the National Association for Charitable Gift Planning. So was there anything else, Miss Deb, that I have forgotten to say?
No, thank you, Carrie. How many of us are members of Plan Giving Roundtable? Just quick show of hands. Cool. Okay. Maybe we could do a quick round of introductions just so our panelists know who's with us today and from where we come and what our roles are. And I'm Deb Dale. I'm the new Chief Development Officer at Arizona Public Media. I'll pass it over, Debbie, to Kelly. Oh, I picked a mute person. Sorry. I mean, on mute.
And sorry, I wasn't ready to unmute. Good morning again, everyone. Kelly Holt, Director of Philanthropy with the Ameren Museum. And I also have the pleasure of being the Board Treasurer with PGRT Southern Arizona. Thanks for being here. And for all of you who've been here all week, thank you. And huge thanks once again to Deb.
Yeah.
And you want to pass it? We all forget the passing part, but it's just the easiest because everybody's screens are organized differently.
I'm tossing it down to Edna below me.
Hi, everybody. Edna Mesa-Aguirre, incoming PGRT board member. I will be doing, Deb's all happy because she's going to pass the symposium baton to me. So just remember, I'm filling very big shoes. Just remember that this time next year. I work on the transition team for Laura Conifer County Attorney, and I have my CFRE, and I'm Tucsonan. I pass this on to Monica Vera.
Hi, my name is Monica Vera. I work at Beach Fleischman. I'm a CPA, and I'm a senior tax manager, and I specialize in nonprofits. So I will pass over to Jeffrey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Petrovic, or Jeff Petrovic, whatever you prefer. I'm easy with that one. But I'm the Vice President of Philanthropy at United Way of Tucson and Southern Arizona. And I'm a board member at large with PGRT and or Plan Giving Roundtable of Southern Arizona. And it's great to be here. Thank you, Deb, for planning this. I was really looking forward to today's conversation. So thank you for including this in the agenda. I will pass it on to, how about Tamara?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tamara McKinney, and I'm the Senior Director of Philanthropic Services at the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona. Haven't been with the Roundtable for very long, but loving being with all of you this week, and great job on coordinating this all. It's been great.
Thanks. I'll pass it.
I forgot again. I am going to pass it to Angie.
Thanks, Tamara. I'm Angie Laskarides. I'm the Regional Director for Arizona Community Foundation. And I'm also on the board of Plan Giving Roundtable. I was the program chair for the year. Those programs are finished as educational sessions. We culminated this year in this wonderful educational symposium. Welcome. I will pass to, let's see, I'm going to introduce my speakers. So who has
Tiana and Jackie, it looks like.
Okay, go Tiana. Tian.
Hi, it's a hard name. My mom was creative. It's Tian Kennedy, and I'm the PR and Development Director at Gap Ministries here in Tucson.
And I think that leaves us with Jackie before our panelists.
Jackie.
And I'm last. So Jackie Mingle, I'm an estate planning attorney at Fleming and Curdy, and I am the membership chair of PGRT. And I am off video because my internet is unstable. So I'm going to stay. Apparently, if you don't put the video on, you get a little better connection. So I'm going to unfortunately stay incognito.
Hidden. Well, thank you all for joining us again. And I want to take a quick moment to do a sponsor thank you and shout out. And today our sponsor happens to be the Arizona Community Foundation, represented by Angie Laskarides. And not only, so I think everyone knows this, Community Foundation of Southern Arizona has Pima County and Santa Cruz County. And then Arizona Community Foundation has the rest of the state, I think, including Cochise County. So Angie is sort of the regional director of Cochise County. So all of our friends in Sierra Vista and surrounding environs. And we also get loaned the brilliance and talent of Angie. So thank you very much. Thank your bosses for that as well, Angie. Did you want to do a little infomercial about ACF or talk about
Well, only in terms of how important continuing education is to us. It's a huge part of capacity building. So if anyone is not a member, I really encourage you to join PGRT. It's something that I look forward to. You know, I've been in philanthropy for over 30 years, yet I'm finding value every single time I come to the table for PGRT. And the networking is fantastic. Sometimes that's one of the best ways that we learn. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here. And I hope you will consider joining. We've made it very reasonably priced. But of course, more important is what you get for your money, and it is well worth it. So please join us.
Well, that was very magnanimous of you. Thank you for using your platform to increase our membership. But I wholeheartedly second everything Angie said. It's a really great group. So with that, Angie will be our moderator today. So I turn it over to her to introduce our panelists and take it away.
Yes, I am very excited and humbled and a little intimidated by the women that are on our panel today. Our topic is the culture of philanthropy in communities of color. And we have some outstanding panelists, and it's such an honor to make these introductions. I'm going to start with Monica Nuvamsa first. She's the executive director of the Hopi Foundation, and of course, a member of the nation. Monica is from the Water Cloud clan, and I can't pronounce the name of her village, Songu Pavi, she can correct me. But Monica has wonderful career experience in the world of philanthropy. Early on, she developed and managed the Hopi tribe's domestic violence program. Very, very important program and service. She served both as an advocate and a project coordinator, but then she got a political appointment to serve in the role of intergovernmental affairs liaison for the Hopi tribe. Now, how important is that? Very, very important. Her tenure has also included 10 years on KUYI, Hopi Radio, general manager. So she's got the PR aspect covered again, as well as the associate director of programs for the Hopi Foundation. Monica served on a number of local, regional, and nonprofit boards, including Native American Agriculture Fund, the First Nations Development Institute, Native Americans in Philanthropy, Arizona Grantmakers Forum. Some of you may know her from there. Native Public Media, and the Hopi Education Endowment Fund. And this, this organization is longstanding, has a number of philanthropic funds from which they make grants, but they're truly a leader within the nation and the state in terms of philanthropy, and are very, very savvy and experienced. All of our organizations are different today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I know about each one, and you're going to get these differing perspectives, not only by the communities they represent, but also the type of organization they are. Also on our panel today is Debi Chess. She's the executive director of the Dunbar Pavilion, as a wonderful African-American Center for Art and Culture. But she's been in the nonprofit program development and leadership world for over 25 years, even though she's only 30 years old, right? Same as
Right.
And that's included youth development, community development, and arts-based economic development. You may know her as the development director for the Loft, which she did for 3 years, or also likely as executive director of the Arts Foundation for Tucson and Southern Arizona. In 2017, she accepted an impact fellowship from U of A School of Social and Behavioral Science. And so she's working at the historically segregated Dunbar School, which was built in 1918, the year of the Spanish flu, it occurs to me. And the school was built to educate Black children in grades K through 9 in Tucson. But it's now becoming this wonderfully vital community cultural center. And it's very grassroots. It has a more narrow focus than either of our other two organizations. But I think it brings a wonderful perspective to the conversation today. So I'm really happy that Debi has agreed to join us. And last but not least is the fabulous Lydia Aranda. She is the founder and chairwoman of De Veritas BBC Group, the creator and host of Diverse Cities Bilingual Broadcast Company. And she's moderated, keynoted, and co-hosted Fortune 500 events and fundraisers all across the United States and abroad. She's also a philanthropist herself and an award-winning voice of influence for women. She's well known for her years at Wells Fargo. She was a regional vice president of diverse segments. She's also a leader in the National Hispanic Corporate Council, NBC Universal Summit, and with the Arizona Governor's Office as an advisor and small business director. So wow, fabulous national and international experience. She's currently president of Southern Arizona and Border Communities for Chicanos por la Causa. And she works closely with corporations, nonprofits, and elected leaders to create educational and economic sustainability for families and entrepreneurs in our wonderful Southern Arizona region. So having made those introductions, I know you can probably guess why I feel so humbled and a little bit intimidated by the members of our panel. I mean, wow. Wow, I'm just so happy to have them here. And we want to have, we're going to have some comments and a presentation type format, but we really want this to be conversational too. I'm going to watch the chat for questions, and then we'll have a regular Q&A session at the end. But I do have a series of topics that I would like each panelist to address, and to educate us by starting out with a little educational perspective. I would like each one, and I will I guess start in alphabetical order, Debi, Lydia, and then Monica. and have them share with us how philanthropy has traditionally been accomplished in their community of color. You know, institutional, non-institutional, formal, informal. You know, how has that happened over the lifetime of the community? So Debbie, take it away. Thank you.
Yeah. So typically in the African American community, philanthropy has been extremely informal and happened through faith communities, through churches, and through small networks. And we see that as we see how that has manifested itself, particularly during slavery, and the need to create communities, assist communities, individuals seeking to leave enslaved situations. If you look at the Underground Railroad, how that informal network of help and assistance from enslaved people to unenslaved and also including non-people of color in that assistance league. But it traditionally has happened in informal situations, and that's because Black people just have not had either the political pool or the economic pool to create these larger systems of philanthropic support. So in instances, let's say, I think more of what a really clear example of this informal assistance is through adoptions, if you look at adoptions. So what would normally happen in a family of color around adoptions, if a young woman found herself unable to, or under whatever circumstances, care for a child, there wouldn't be this adoption process that you would, sign up with an agency and so on and so forth. Big mama, grandmama, aunties, the community would step in and care for that child and create a support system for that woman and for that child. And that goes with that example, translates into economic support. If a family were suffering, going through a particular hardship, the community came together in a very informal way, typically through churches and faith-based communities, to provide support for that family. I know I myself, growing up in the church, scholarships, ways of getting into college or taking advantage of school opportunities that may have not been available to me if my community did not pitch in to help me get there. It wasn't apply to this organization or apply to that organization and put your application into a pile of many others to compete. It was that church community coming together to raise money, to provide support or provide the opportunities. So what we're seeing now, though, church is not as centralized in the African community as it once was. And families are tending to disperse. The family network isn't as tight as it once was historically. And so what is filling those gaps is still in question for the Black community. And I know Community Foundation and Arizona Community Foundation have formed these African American philanthropic organizations or groups within their philanthropic thing, but those have kind of arisen as a void that has taken place in the Black community in the disbursement of families, the family network. Church, like I said, hasn't been the center of many African Americans and has not been the go-to typically. So we have had to enter into a little more formalized philanthropic things and philanthropic entities to provide support to our communities. But historically, that's where we've looked, is to our churches, to our mutual aid societies, and cultivating that wealth within our community has become more of a challenge as we see more economic, a disproportionate effects of criminalization in the African American community, drugs, those types of things have kind of infiltrated into our communities. And now we're left at where does that philanthropic hub sit, and a consistent and reliable one. Also, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate those comments. And I'd like to turn it over to Lydia now to talk to us about the Latin community and its historical perspective on philanthropy. And you are also muted at the moment.
Thank you so much. And Debbie, that was just such a great overview, and to some of the experiences and commentary about how community, how family plays a role in the community giving in the entire Latino community, Hispanic community, which is so very, very diverse and differs on the geographical locations or the urban to rural experience, as well as just the multiple cultures that comprise the Latino community. What I would say is that our community has historically been particularly organized through grassroots organizations, so that what started with advocacy and then activism, finding an interesting combination, and depending on where and what the issue, and throughout the decades, how that has transformed to be an approach of support that continues to be centered often around family and students, to a bigger degree about how support of family or students translates and transforms into economic support, meaning for businesses or even industry. And with all that comes the perspectives that really differ, whether one is organizing around rural or working conditions, and how that speaks and leads into more broad-based equity issues around education, access to education, support about cultural history, and what an acculturated blend of support looks like. It also varies from West Coast to East Coast, and certainly I think we experienced that here in Southern Arizona so much. Certainly focused on Mexico and Latin America, but the blend of the different cultures from Central America, the Caribbean, from Europe, from Spain and Portugal, and this wonderful, robust combination of cultures, and how that blends with indigenous communities really has given or seeded a lot of the attentions that come into this more blended approach when thinking about what do we do when we are talking about support to the Hispanic community. Are we really, are we talking about cultures that go far back? And is this something that is cuisine and culture and traditionally based? Is it something that is about, again, economic sustainability and folks coming in and deserving and being interested in and needing more access to higher education, more mentorship, more programs and initiatives and funding that will actually help teach some of those global and international type of cultural acculturation issues. So having said that, and thinking about where the marketplace and the economy of scales come into play, and just the super fast growing and expanding, exponentially expanding community called Latinos, and now also not only Latina and Latino, Latinx, millennials, and everything that really swirls around to say buying power, marketing influence, political voice. All of these aspects have had a huge impact on the kind of giving or fundraising that takes place in the sector in general, and then with organizations like Chicanos por la Causa, for example. Being a community development organization, we really look at that whole history, having been around, having been birthed on the notion of equity and access to education, and being advocates for education in 1969, and really taking a stance to a fully developed community development organization that focuses on industry and support, health and human services, social and educational issues, advocacy, both political and otherwise, and the straightforward entrepreneurship and economic development. That whole aspect of looking at those different pillars forces us and allows us as well, we see it as a privilege, to really be able to work with many different industry giving, federal agency type of fundraising and support and dollars, and then programs that are more private or even smaller and customizable for individual donations or individual, what do I want to say, alliances with other organizations, from the Dunbars to the United Ways that are well known, to the American Red Crosses, federal agencies, and kind of everything that goes in between that. So when we think about how do we serve the Latin community, it runs the full spectrum. And that can be very daunting for folks when they're trying to decide within perhaps their corporations or even in their small businesses about how to identify support that might be the most effective. And the truth is that it depends on the issue. It depends on the geographical location. And so collaboration more and more has been a very key factor to successful philanthropy, successful support raising for the Latino community in whole, and really paying attention to who the partners are in a region, but also what are the interesting combinations of needs and priorities of a region. And that is where we are able to identify whether or not to put more dollars in grassroots and sort of family and friend giving kind of programs together, or whether we really go for big grants, and whether we put our own investment as people or as organizations. Again, speaking for CPLC, where can we put our own revenues or our own funding together to match others to create a better result or a bigger result that's going to be more sustainable. It's been a real pleasure over the years to see a lot of new initiatives develop all across the Southwest, particularly here in Arizona, our home state. And for me personally, the last 15 years have shown, I think, a real shift in the way that public, private, and nonprofit sectors are really coming together for more tri-sector collaboration, and what that means to individual donors and people coming into their own. I was really proud to be part of the Latina Giving Circle, which the Arizona Community Foundation is the fiscal supporter of. When that was founded by Belen Gonzalez many years ago now, about 11 years ago, I want to say. It was really wonderful to be part of that charter and to help launch it, and to really think about what were we trying to achieve as women and as Latinas and as organization, and an organization that wanted to support Latina causes. And it has evolved over the years. And I think in keeping with the times, its latest new strategies and expansion down into finding a new home in Southern Arizona, and really looking at some particularly social justice issues that previously it was a little bit more about education and economy and professional development. And now there seems to be a very almost singular focus for the time being on social justice. And so I think that's a great example of how things develop between the CPLC example, the Latina Giving Circle example, it really shows that there are just such a multitude of issues to tackle as a community. And so, working with each other and across sectors and into different divisions, I think is where we're going to find success moving forward.
Very, very informative. Thank you, Lydia. So both philanthropy in the Black community and the Latino community are undergoing transition, I believe is what we're hearing. So Monica, would you like to provide your perspective on the Hopi Nation's traditional means of philanthropy and how you see things changing, if at all?
Sure, thank you. I want to, you'll probably hear some echoing from the words of Debi and Lydia around some of the similar, I guess, transitions that we're experiencing socially, societally within our communities of color. I appreciate the question about how philanthropy traditionally has been accomplished. Hopi is only one of 21 federally recognized tribes in the state of Arizona. We are one of 2 pueblos. I would count the Pascoyaqui as a pueblo in southern Arizona. They're cousins of the Hopi Nation. We do have, as Hopi specifically, a very interdependent social network of clans and villages. It's very complex. We have 12 communities, 12 villages. Each village can host anywhere from 5 to 10 different clans, respectively. And each clan comes from their own backgrounds and histories and migrations before coming to settle in this area. And throughout that time, we're learning about ourselves as people, as families and close-knit groups. We weren't quite settled into any kind of identity during the Great Migration period, which is prehistory for many Native American cultures. But as we settled here on Hopi, we agreed in consensus to integrate into a larger society called Hopi. Hopi in translation means peace. And I've heard that over the years, even as a young person, but I think more, I guess, truthfully, Hopi means balance, means finding balance in everything. And that's what we strive to have. We are not perfect people. I don't believe any society is perfect, but when we look at those values and beliefs, we strive to get to that place where we value one another, where we support one another, where we contribute our personal and community assets toward greater causes, and how we support one another when there are times of need. Those value systems are what tie us together now as a Hopi culture. In addition to that kinship structure, we also have community structures and religious structures that help to weave and tighten that relationship even closer, and allow us to practice those values on a daily basis. I mentioned some of those value systems that we have. There are those core values that we've formally implemented into the Hopi Foundation's philanthropic structure and philosophy. I mentioned respect, gyatsi, which is one of our core values, collaboration, sumi'unangwa, meaning people coming together for a common vision and purpose. Volunteerism and self-agency, which is hita'unangwa. It's that compelling desire from within a person's heart to be able to step forward and give what they can. And mutual aid, which is nami'unangwa, which is caring for one another from our heart. All of these words, these Hopi words that correspond to these philanthropic values, which I believe are shared across the sector. They're considered heart words, like the heart that beats in your chest. Unangwa is the heart in Hopi, and all of these words have that as a core part of their name. Hita Anangwa, Sumi Anangwa, and Nami Anangwa. Those are what we're taught from very early on. It's part of our leadership language, our spiritual language. So it's very much a part of who we are. I heard, I think it was Lydia, well, both of them, Debi and Lydia, had talked about the impact and changes over time. Native communities have had a large impact in colonization several times over, from the Spanish colonization to the American colonization. We've had different experiences through that, and we've struggled to maintain identity and sense of self and perspective and where we stand within the world. So I see a revitalization happening, not just here at Hopi, but across all tribes throughout the United States. The pandemic has revealed quite a bit about where tribes are in their capacity to wield the power of philanthropy, or to access the power of philanthropy in their communities. And it's really exciting for me to see that people in our communities, our diverse communities among tribes, are beginning to explore the formal side of philanthropy. Formal philanthropy for Hopi has always been a challenge due to the value shift. I think it was Debi that mentioned this, to a cash-based economy. In the 1920s to 1930s, there was a federal study, a labor study that went into tribal communities to determine what the ratio was of actual wage jobs and wage economies existed among tribal communities. And as you can probably imagine, in the 1920s and 30s, many tribes were still getting used to being a formal government. They've had traditional governing systems prior to colonization, but trying to wield a new government, much less develop a cash-based economy, the measure at that time showed that many tribes were considered in poverty. And I mentioned to the group of presenters last week when we first met that's the term poverty isn't something we use lightly at the Hopi Foundation, but it is a term that federal government has placed on communities like ours, and not recognizing that during that time, while many of our community members were not in wage positions or wage jobs, they were bringing home valuable assets to their families. They were bringing home agriculture that they grew, corn, they owned livestock, sheep and cattle, and they brought meat. They were hunters. So they were able to provide very well for their families, but through the US standards, our families were in poverty. And that shifted something for our community. It made us look at our own, I guess, concept and systems of value as something to be embarrassed about or to want to change. And I think that's where the shift was for many tribes, especially Hopi, where a lot of our men were moved out of the cornfields and placed onto the railroad industry, or moving away from the reservation to get wage jobs. Another picture to think about during the Great Depression, Hopi was entirely self-sufficient. We had our own Hopi food-based economy. We were, like I mentioned earlier, interdependent based on the social and cultural systems that we had in place. So we didn't know there was a Great Depression. People interviewed some of our tribal leaders at that time and asked how we managed through that. And they said, what Great Depression? And that really makes me think about where we are today, because this pandemic has had such a huge impact on us. I look back at the market crash in 2008, that had a huge impact on us as well. We've moved quite away from self-sufficiency from the Great Depression of the early 1900s. And that calls to mind to think about how we calibrate our perspectives or sense of philanthropy and economy in and among communities of color, because for Hopi, we believe we have a lot of assets. Had we been asked questions differently in that labor study, we would have shown a very robust economy, different types of trades that existed in our community, different types of income structures that were based in our community that were really valuable to us, and they were positioned on generations of knowledge and teaching. So when I think about, you know, how the Hopi Foundation has shifted in trying to promote formal philanthropy in our community, we now tend to focus more on growing our in-kind donors locally, because that's really where we want to grow philanthropy. We want to create that self-sufficiency within our community, and value their time, their donations, because most people don't have the kind of cash flow within their budgets to be able to give formally in that way, but they do give their time, and they do give their talent and their products that they make, which are also as valuable. So we focus on valuing those things, at least in terms of where we are in the growth of formal philanthropy for Hopi. That is to say, it doesn't mean that's our strategy across the board. We do definitely engage in more formal and standard, I guess, philanthropy when it comes to engaging other communities outside of Hopi, and other potential donors outside of Hopi. But I just want to share that kind of picture with you in terms of what we're doing here on the Hopi Reservation and through the Hopi Foundation.
Excellent, excellent. I really learned a lot from that. And I thank you for the historical information too, because that has not been something that I have been exposed to over my past, but very, very critical for the work of philanthropy. So what I'm hearing from all three of you is that your communities have been quite internally focused historically, but that there has been some transition. Some of you, earlier, some of you maybe more recently, toward increasing connectedness with other communities, and also, seeking philanthropy from outside the community. I hope that has been a positive experience. It's my personal wish that all of us become more interconnected and help each other, in building capacity and relationships and knowledge. I also know that there are others who wish to be more connected with communities of color, but are not sure what's appropriate. What is the best way to do so? Relationships are one of the things that our Plan Giving Roundtable talks about. And I'm hoping you would, educate us about what is an appropriate way. Are you interested in further connectedness and relationships and philanthropy? And if so, tell us the best approach. How do we do that in the most appropriate way? So I think this time I'll start with Lydia, then Monica, then Debi, and then I have one more question for you if we have time after that. So Lydia, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Monica, for all of your commentary. Before I answer the question at hand, or this kind of goes with it, I really, what has resonated among many things that you said, but one of the things that resonated with me is the comment about valuing the different assets, and that assets are looked at differently. And again, I think that speaks to perspective by funders as well as perspective by communities who are in need or who may not feel they're particularly in need, but that doesn't mean there isn't a need to fill. And that I think addresses a little bit of what you're asking, Angie, in that collaboration, in my view, and I would say in CPLC's view as well, so Lydia's view as well as CPLC's view, and in my experience, collaboration is really a very case-by-case opportunity. And what I enjoy seeing with opportunities to speak with people about collaborating, whether they are individuals or whether it's community to community, is really looking at the opportunity to not necessarily fund one-hit wonders, but to look at phased development, to look at ways that we can all grow from each other and address that what's in it for me issue by saying what's in it for all of us. What is it that we have in common? And there is difficulty in that, because it first forces whoever is asking to really think about what their priority is and whether the desire to seek funding or human resources or financial resources or political resources, whatever kind of capital we're seeking, why are we doing that? Is it because it's truly part of our mission? And is it because perhaps we're having difficulty in our mission? Are we having difficulty in perhaps just the way we approach our mission? Is our messaging falling on deaf ears and not really resonating with anybody? Or are we just simply being greedy? I think most of the time, most organizations are not simply being greedy, which doesn't mean they're not being driven, to get more and more and more. The drive is coming for a different reason, not just to be big and hoard it all, but to figure out what is it that we're trying to fix or solve for. And that's a deeper conversation everywhere. And if nothing else, out of a weird year like 2020, it's been a learning year, and so many of those lessons about being intentional, about being mindful, about being inclusive, have come to the forefront on every angle, every aspect, every issue possible. Economy, family health, wellness of a community, safety of a community, sustainability of individuals and societies, and having some opportunity to exchange opinion in that, whether that is political or whether that is simply seeking help. Those kind of conversations are very full. And this is the time to really pull from those lessons. I know I went off the question a little bit there, Angie, but it sort of just led me into that philosophy. So I'm happy to get more specific again, or I can pause and let the other ladies participate in that.
Okay, well, I appreciate the comments regardless if they were important, even if they weren't exactly where we were. I think I'll go to Monica and Debbie, and then we'll come back to you for further edification. So talk to us about what's needed, what's appropriate, and guide and direct us, Monica.
Okay. All right. Just responding to your question about how donors can connect to and engage with communities of color. This is one of the more common questions that I get in conversations like this. And I always find it fascinating that it's such a hard and challenging thing for either funders or donors. And I want to encourage everyone to know that it's not that intimidating, although I guess maybe communities of color can seem intimidating. We're not scary, we're just a little different, and being open. So I have a few points on this. One is to be truthful to your intention to help our communities, whether it's short-term or long-term, because that does change the dynamic of the relationship. If you're just a one-time funder, or you're looking to really engage long-term, I really encourage the long-term relationships, because that seems to have the most rewards, not just for the community, but also for the donors. And Also, in terms of long-term relationships, approaching communities of color as a partner. And it's really, it's hard to get your mind out of that, I guess, paradigm, power shift of being a funder, offering something to a community. But if you look at yourself as a partner, you begin to see yourself at the same level and really begin to be open to learning. And the last thing I would say is, do some research, show the community you're approaching that you have done some learning on your own to begin engaging with those communities. Oftentimes I hear from tribal communities is that we all, as fundraisers or, development staff, we tend to have professor hat on all the time. We're always having to preface our request with a long history lesson, and that gets tiring after a while. So help give us some breaks in learning a little bit more. And there's a lot more resources out there about our communities. I encourage you to take a look at First Nations Development Institute's website. They've done some wonderful research. I'm always happy to share history. I'm a context person and I love history, so I don't get tired of that personally. I just hope you don't get tired of me telling history too much. Being open to learning is really important. And then most importantly, being flexible, because we have so many different tribal communities throughout the country. Every community is set up differently, operates differently, our priorities are different. And we all come in at different levels of capacity. So learning what our capacity is really important when engaging with us, because some of us are more ready than others. It doesn't mean we're not willing to learn. I think just, again, building that relationship and that trust from the onset is so important.
Okay, relationships and trust are a familiar theme for us in our planned giving education work. Okay, Debi, talk to us.
Yeah, I so appreciate what Monica laid out, because I agree 100% with all of those points, but I want to drill down a little more deeply about this idea of asset-based giving. So many times communities of color are required to kind of approach our work or frame our work in this poor woe is me kind of framework, and questions on grant applications and questions around, the amount of people in poverty that you're going to serve, the amount of people that, how are you going to save the Black community from, and no doubt there is deep need in these communities of color. But if we can also encompass the great things that are happening, support the wonderful things, and elevate those things in our narratives, of being given the space to elevate those things instead of talking all the time about all the horrible things, all the crime and the unemployment and all of that. There's no shortage of statistics. One Google search will point you toward any negative statistic that you want about a community of color. Can we start shifting that to the assets that are in these communities of color and how we can support those assets in growing larger and bigger? Because when you keep, as donors and philanthropists, when we require an organization or an individual to stay in a space of lack, then that organization stays in a place of lack, and you will always see them in a space through the lens of lack. And so that's something that I really encourage the giving community to kind of critique itself around what you're asking of organization, and how you can recognize your donor intent through a lens of prosperity instead of lack. So that's one thing. And the other piece, I think maybe that was it, because I think Monica covered everything else. I mean, she's absolutely right about, you know, respect and coming in as partners. And so kind of this asset, it's called ABCD, asset-based community development. And so that's something that I'm really a champion of. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Years ago, there was I don't know if all of you are familiar with the United Negro College Fund. And I think now it's been changed to the United College Fund or something like that. They took Negro out. But the tagline in that scholarship thing was, we're not asking for a handout, just a hand. And I think that that's something that it stuck with me as hearing that message is that this is, you know, in the giving relationship, there's a difference between charity and philanthropy, as we all know. And this idea of philanthropic support needs to come from this idea of a hand and not necessarily a handout.
I think you hit it so right on the head with that. I know that in our organization, we and many others, we very much focus on not a handout, a hand up type of approach to have conversations with people and to really go into sharing background, sharing reasons of why we are interested in working, or having organizations work with us or us work with them, and showing that mutual benefit of the work and what that outcome, which is what I hear both Monica and Debi saying, and to add to the comment about focusing on prosperity instead of the poverty or instead of the adversity. The truth is all communities, all facets of community go through the ups and downs of adversity, and they affect a lot of different people, but that doesn't mean that because of that, then holistically, that sector, that segment, that culture is then only facing crisis. Often we bring the strength that is needed to help resolve the crisis and to flip the adversity into prosperity. And also we shouldn't be punished for that. If our organizations have demonstrated strength in serving a community and serving an issue or in resolving a problem, and over the decades have built up experience, or even if just over in a couple of years, it doesn't have to be for those of us organizations that are decades old. Some who are newer, but have really done a great job of pulling experience and expertise together to help address an issue. We should be then not ignored in requests for support. Now that's a little bit different because that might be, to what Debi said, going for support that's considered charitable support. And so that's always a delicate dance and a fine line of distinction. But in the philanthropical sense, for sure, and in the planned giving sense, for sure, we would love to be able to tout our innovativeness and be able to partner with donors or potential donors to say, well, what dreams do you have and what issues are those, and to recognize that maybe any of us bring, or any of our communities bring, that opportunity to the table for those philanthropers to meet their desires.
Great, that's a terrific lead into my final quick question for all three of you. For our professional advisors and others in attendance, talk to us about your planned giving programs, gift acceptance policies. I believe all of you have planned giving programs, but I'd like you to share a little bit more with the group about that.
I'll start. At the Dunbar, ours is still emerging as we are emerging as an organization. Even though the Dunbar has been in existence since 1996 in terms of its current iteration of moving towards a community cultural arts center. A lot of those years have been in just, you know, keeping the lights on, quite frankly, in a 55,000 square foot piece of property that we manage on 2 acres. So you can imagine what the day-to-day overhead, you know, pipes breaking. One building is built in 1948. The other building, which you spoke of, Angie, built in 1918. And so you can imagine there is a lot of capital expense in running such a facility. And so many years have been just kind of keeping that thing standing. And so now that we've been able to kind of breathe a little bit and look towards the future a little bit more, our planned giving program, I guess you could say, is emerging, and we would love some advice, to be honest. You know, we've got some experts here. I've got some experts here in the room. If you know, get some advice about how to facilitate that program. What happens with us is we have alumni that have been a part of this process for so long, and as they die and bequeath pieces of their assets to the Dunbar, we look towards professionals to help us figure out how to either liquidate that asset or what the implications are for us. You know, so far we haven't been given pieces of property or anything. It's been cash, which is a pretty easy thing to kind of to actuate donor intent around. But this is an invitation to you all to give us some guidance on a formal gift acceptance policy.
Okay, we talked about that the other day, and you're welcome anytime to attend as my guest. This is what we do, is teach you know, each other on how to work together in facilitating planned gifts. So we'll see
I
you
know
again.
the lawyers will be really happy to hear that we will finally, you know, we get a phone call from an estate attorney saying you've been named, you know, as the beneficiary, and so we go, yay, and then we go, oh no.
Well, let's get you where you need to be. Certainly, we can partner with you on that.
Wonderful.
Okay, Lydia, how about you next? And then we'll finish with you, Monica. Thank you.
Sure. So CPLC, we do have a formal program, but it has developed and then plateaued and developed and plateaued a bit over the years. And in the recent years, I'm going to say probably the last 3 years, there's been some renewed attention to putting some more strength into the different aspects of planned giving and not just considering it sort of one donor relations area of a person who also then does sponsorship and something else, but really to say, let's build up some new approaches and let's look at our history. And we have received through other kinds of support, we have received real estate, we have done some exchanges, we've done some things that have been a little bit more historically, a little bit more in the exchange of a project or an initiative. And so we really took a deep dive and put some folks on our team to give more, to build more of a straightforward policy and process that will allow us to take that experience and expertise and put it into then the planned giving aspect of philanthropy and being the recipient of that. So we do have some experience and we could probably help you a little bit, Debbie. We'd be happy to. But I think all the attendees here on the panel are going to be far more experienced than we are. And I wouldn't doubt that we'll probably come raising our hands in a few months for that as well. But one of the things that we've also done is really pay attention to informing and helping leverage our champions to help us in that aspect. And what I mean by that is our community advisory board members, our governing board members, and even longtime supporters, and our own internal staff or people who have retired and maybe worked for us for a long time previous to that, and really working with them to help educate them on the different types of donor leveraging that we can do, and building up more donors that way. And we have a little guide that was put together earlier in the year, for what we call P2P fundraisers. And that was put together because most of the training, if you will, was done at a board meeting or in a quick phone call or other kind of web session. And because of COVID and the desire to really formalize how we can approach things like maybe small salon events and other kinds of aspects that really make giving a sort of a phased process, we decided to formalize that and have that be an asset to others if they need it as well. So we have kind of a how-to guide and steps that include, what to do, even if it's as simple as starting a funding page for a nonprofit, not only for our own, but if we want to help others figure out how to portray that message, how to leverage social media, how not to just go into everything, all at once. And so we actually feel that by helping educate others in that process, that helps us get in front of hopefully more supporters ourselves. So that kind of falls into our planned giving. And for then, of course, more formal information on that, we just let me know, or come to us at cplc.org, and we can connect you with the right people and have a more in-depth conversation about our plans.
Rising tide raises all ships.
That's right.
Okay, Monica.
Angie, can you repeat the question for me so I stay focused? I might ramble.
Oh, no, not at all. The question relates to your planned giving program, and also any other nations that you might know about. I mean, where is Hopi with regards to planned giving? I think I know, but explain to us. I think you've shown quite a level of sophistication, and for the folks that are members of our organization and the community. If someone has the desire to leave a planned gift, do you accept them? What's your program like? How long have you been at it? That kind of thing.
Sure. Okay, great. Like most, growing nonprofits, we sort of fell into that aspect of our work back in the late 80s, early 90s, and have learned over time lessons along the way that helped us to define the parameters and the role that our giving program wants to serve. We don't have a huge staff in terms of development. Pretty much myself and my finance director are the primary people that handle this. And so we don't have huge capacity to manage complex gifts. So what we do as part of our giving policy, our gift acceptance policy, is that we ask people to liquidate those assets that they want to give prior to giving to the foundation. We've worked hand in hand for a number of years, I think almost 30 years now, with the Arizona Community Foundation, which hosts about 9 of our endowment funds to date. And depending on the interest of our donors, we can guide them toward planned giving toward any one of our endowments, or the possible creation of a new endowment if they want to make a long-term impact in an area of our mission. So part of our goal is to stay very mission focused. We have a pretty broad mission, by the way, so that's not too hard, but I think part of our challenge is making sure that we're creating that alignment of the donors' needs to where we see the growth of our community in 20 years and beyond. what kind of investments we want to make in our community during that time. And we're looking at generational impact, not just the short term when it comes to plant gifts. So, you know, there are a number of, I think, scenarios that we would fall into around plant giving, but we definitely do I guess, tailor our approach based on what the donor is offering. So we've tried to create some transparency or more transparency around that to make it easier. Having those tools at hand definitely allows us to form better partnerships and alliances. So other than that, I think I may have answered your question.
Oh, absolutely. I know we're heading toward the end of our program today. I'll just do a quick summary and then see if there are any questions. I think we've learned that no one community is monolithic. It can vary by region, also in various aspects of the culture. It's all about relationships. I think we all recognize we had that affirmation today. So we need to do our homework. We need to be open. We need to be flexible, and make sure that we do our own due diligence when seeking to partner or collaborate with any community of color, friends and neighbors, communities with each other. So thank you so much. This has been wonderful for me, and I think some comments to reflect that as well. Do we have time for questions, Deb? And do we have any? I don't see any questions in the chat, but you might as well just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask if we've got any.
If our panelists can stay, it'd be great. This was so interesting and so helpful and eye-opening. So I'm really thrilled. Thank you, Angie, for coordinating this. This has been really valuable. Do we have any questions?
I have a question, if it's appropriate for panelists to ask a question.
Come on, go for it.
How often, it occurred to me as we were having this discussion, from the organization side, I have certainly been on the both sides of the table. And so with my organization hat on, how often are there forums like this in which donors get an opportunity to talk a little bit more deeply about why they give, you know, like from the heart, really from the heart. And the reason I say this is recently I had a donor, this was a donor advised fund that came to the Dunbar, and the donor reached out and said, you know, my family gave a really compelling family history about racism in their family. And it really helped me understand what they were looking for in giving to the Dunbar. And it really helped me understand the importance of what we do larger than service to the Black community. They really painted a picture to me of why the Dunbar is important to all of Tucson and to people that I may never even meet, right? Or people that interact with people may never even meet. And so I say that to say, I know that there are events where donors and, you know, all that come together, but has there ever been a forum where you just go more deeply into why people give? Just a question.
I will say I'm also really active with the Association of Fundraising Professionals and Plan Giving Roundtable. And I will tell you, there is no more popular panel than a donor panel. Like everybody shows up to hear what the donors say. But ideally, we're having those communications with our donors all the time because everybody has a different reason for giving, right? Everybody connects with different parts of the mission or comes at it from different reasons. And I think as a professional fundraiser, you know, we all say we're matchmakers, and we are. Like, that's the beautiful part of fundraising. People think that it's this very scary, you know, oh God, we're gonna have to ask people for money. this money, like that is an amazing story, Debbie. And to me, I can see this person feeling like, you know, I also sometimes joke that we're money launderers, right? This person is like cleansing their family's dirty history and dirty soul by investing in something to pay it forward and try to make a difference. You know, to me, that is so moving. And it's just, it's more than just asking people for checks. You know, these are relationships. These are moving the needle. There are people who will give for tax reasons, don't get me wrong. But by and large, that's not why people give. You know, it's very emotional and it's a way to make a statement. You know, there's a great saying that other than the ballot box, philanthropy is the best way to make a statement about the community you want to live in. Right. And it's true. That is so impactful. But I love that idea too about, you know, really having a panel of folks who are so committed to making change that they will invest, you know, as much time, talent, and treasure as they have. And I think that's just an amazing story. I love that.
Thank you.
We do have our donors come together and share their stories sometimes, but because it is emotional and personal, they're normally smaller groups. People are a little bit shy about it, especially if, you know, they've left their entire estate, you know, or a large part of their estate. So I'm going to think more about that. Maybe tomorrow, do you guys do donor events like that too? Anyone else?
To unmute myself there.
There you go.
We do, absolutely, several times during the year. You know, we try to bring together our donors, either with kind of their fields of interest, what they're passionate about, so that other kind of animal welfare donors can meet donors who are passionate about the same things and make those connections and really build community among our donors. But again, just echoing Angie's words, it is a personal thing, it is a private thing. And so typically that's not something we do a lot in a public arena. It's really a smaller event that is that allows for those stories to happen. But certainly, I mean, the best donor stewardship advice I was ever given was, when you receive a gift from a donor, pick up the phone and call them and talk to them and find out why, you know, what inspired them to give, how they're connected to the cause. And that's been true across all of my development experience, whether I was working in youth and education or with seniors, that everyone has a reason for giving, and very rarely is it taxes.
Yeah, true.
Debbie, if you have someone who's willing to tell their story, you know, it would be a great idea to have, you know, an intimate event, maybe at somebody's beautiful house, and serve wine and cheese, and, you know, invite some of your volunteers, board members, and longer term donors, and have a very short program. Most of it's social and networking, you know, but there is a time to introduce someone and let them tell their story about giving, and they make it about themselves. You know, indirectly it's about Dunbar, but it's really, you know, a way for people who share the same passions to get to know one another and bond that way. And sometimes you can find folks who are willing to tell, you know, their own personal story. Sometimes they cry, you know, it can be really emotional, but it's beautiful too.
I want to chime in praise of PGRT. We did have a panel a few years ago. It took place at Tucson Botanical Gardens that had 2 bequest donors and the development professionals that had worked with them. And it was such a beautiful conversation. But I also, while I'm speaking, Lydia, Debbie, Monica, thank you so much for the conversation today. And Angie, for leading such a productive conversation today. This was wonderful. I hope that we can find a way to share this conversation with more people.
Yeah, it is being recorded.
Yes.
So I should have worn mascara, apparently. And whoever has the baby kitties, Monica, is that you with the baby
Great for you,
kitties?
Monica.
I feel like we should get to see them. I
It's not the
can
little
hear
head
them the whole
of
time. I'm like, oh my God, there's baby kitties.
They're adorable.
One of them popped their head up a little bit, Monica, at one point. That was fun to
Oh, sweet.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you
Well,
so
thank you
much
for
for
the
being here
opportunity to
today.
share.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you, Angie. And we'll see you